Bonjour à toutes et toutes. Je viens de dire au révérend Jesse Jackson combien nous étions fiers et heureux de l'accueillir ici à Paris. Je vais dire tout le bien que nous pensons de lui et que justifie cet honneur. Je vais plutôt le faire par commodité en anglais. I was saying how proud we are to have you here. So, Mr. Prime Minister, Mrs. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we are here today to honor a great friend of France, of our Republic, someone with highly appreciated and very popular in our country, but not just in our country. He is a visionary with a talent for uniting and leading people, with moral and physical courage, which has helped him to overcome adversity and to change the destiny of the United States, our oldest ally, and to change our world for the better. My dear Reverend Jesse Jackson, yours was a long walk towards emancipation and justice. And the path you traveled were steep and hazardous. Born in Greenville, South Carolina, on the 8th of October 1941, in a segregated America, just a few days before the US joined the war. You grew up in an environment steeped in the infamy and obstacles associated with those times. Appalling discrimination based on skin color written into the law, a two-tier education system, unequal access to employment, in short, terrible inequalities in terms of hope and destiny, based solely on whether a person was born black or white. From your earliest years, you were hungry for knowledge and justice. At school, you were a gifted, diligent student, so much so that your French teacher commented that it was impossible not to notice you, not to like you, not to do everything possible to help you fulfill the great destiny that was already stirring inside you. The church pews where Baptist preachers taught you about public speaking and moral obligations were like a second school for you. It was there that your vocation for speaking to people's hearts and guiding them forward was kindled. This drive towards knowledge, towards others, towards God, also propelled you to sporting excellence. A very promising young American football player, on the field you showed the same discipline, the same love for movement, for looking forward, and evidently the same ability to lead that you have demonstrated in all aspects of your life. This love for movement was not simply a personal preference. It was also necessary to shake up history. Back then, the world around you was static, with the same old injustices reproducing themselves generation after generation. It was a world of racism, of institutionalized inequality, of deprivation of rights, far from the founding principles of the United States. It was a world in which you attended a segregated elementary school in Greenville, where the sport facilities you had access to were hugely inferior to those available to white children. It was a world with discrimination in public transportation and in public areas in general. But to challenge the status quo, there must be impetus, a movement. And that movement started in the mid-50s when African Americans began marching to transform the United States. And a few years later, you were among them, leading the marches alongside Martin Luther King. In 1955, you were 14 when, in Montgomery, Alabama, 500 kilometers from your home, a black lady refused to give up her seat to a white man on a bus. Rosa Parks the lady who stood tall by remaining seated, who, in your words, sat down in order that we all might stand up, and paradoxically, whose jailing would break down the barriers of injustice and open the doors of emancipation. When Martin Luther King launched the bus boycott, you felt an irrepressible desire to follow this example so that things would change forever. In the years that followed, you took part in the movement to desegregate Greenville Public Library and led the student sit-in. After high school, you won a scholarship to play American football at the University of Illinois. Though the university was not segregated and the racial prejudices were more insidious, they were not as hurtful than in South Carolina. You returned to your native South for a while to study at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College, a prestigious, historically black university where you would meet your future wife, Jacqueline, with whom you would have your children. But Martin Luther King's call to action permanently changed your plans. Like him, you wanted to become a minister, and you returned to Chicago to attend the Chicago Theological Seminary. Chicago, your adopted city, was to be one of the hubs of the civil rights movement. It was at the University of Chicago in 1956 that Martin Luther King delivered a famous speech that resonated deeply throughout the United States. You then devoted yourself entirely to defending this cause, giving up your studies, accepting the permanent risks of being arrested, attacked, or even lynched, and you soon became one of Dr. King's closest companions, crisscrossing America to spread his call for freedom, justice, and equality, human and civil rights. We remember the photo of you standing beside Martin Luther King on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis on the 4th of April, 1968, only a few hours before his assassination. The assassination of a man of virtue, a man of peace, a 39-year-old husband and father, which provoked outrage around the world. 40 years later, on the night of Barack Obama's election, on the 4th of November 2008, you tearfully weighed up the progress made since that tragic day. That night, your tears deeply moved your compatriots who recognized your contribution to that coming-of-age moment for your nation. Because between these two dates, between these two words, 1968 and 2008, you were integral to those huge strides that were made towards genuine equality of rights and opportunity. 2 months after Martin Luther King's assassination, you were ordained a minister and took up the torch for his movement, campaigning tirelessly for civil justice and the economic and social advancement of the African American community by creating Operation Push in 1971 and then the National Rainbow Coalition in 1984. The two organizations merged in 1996 to form the Rainbow Push Coalition. Their success was built on your powerful oratory skills, your prodigious charisma, and your sense of friendship, organization, and I have to say, compromise. You were able to transform your unrelenting civil activism into tangible progress in all areas. Progress which changed the daily lives of those who place their hopes in you. You also changed American politics forever by bringing these hopes to the heart of the presidential campaigns of 1984 and 1988, and including them in a political, economic, and social vision of a brotherly America, which would finally fulfill the founding fathers' promise of independence and the dream of Martin Luther King. Your enthusiastic campaigning in the Democratic primaries lives long in the memory. From the bayous of Deep South to the frozen expanses of Michigan, where you sprang a surprise by winning the caucus in March 1988. Although you did not reach the end of the path to the presidency, you paved the way for those who came after and who continued to be guided by the ultimate dream of a united and reconciled America. 2008 would definitely have been impossible without your fights and your contribution. The enthusiasm and hope you generated throughout the United States resulted in huge waves of voter registration. Over 1 million in 1984, over 2 million in 1988, which helped reduce the gap in voter turnout and political involvement between white and black populations. During the 90s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, a wind of change blew across the world. You campaigned for the end of apartheid and led many international missions as a presidential envoy, fighting for access to education and for the climate. And you still follow up all these fights. I know your close link with our good friend Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa and a lot of leaders like him, and I have a special thought for him today. In 2000, President Clinton awarded you the Presidential Medal of Freedom, your country's highest distinction. Today, it is the French Republic which is decorating you with its highest distinction. Because beyond all these contributions to your country and to civil rights, you are a special friend of France. I mentioned your French teacher at school in Greenville. Perhaps your affection for France has its roots in that class. In any case, this affection has remained with you, for which we are deeply grateful. You know our history, our relations with the United States, our singular voice in the international arena, the shared experience of the crimes of slavery and human trafficking, the role of abolitionist movements in the 19th century, our commitment to human rights, our desire for mutually respectful relations with Africa. And I'm extremely happy to have a lot of great leaders with huge contribution to this fight for our countries today in this room with you. On several occasions, you have eloquently expressed your friendship with our nation. A less known story for which you never thought credit bears mentioning today, and we just discussed about that before the ceremony. During the first Gulf War in 1990, when citizens from several countries seeking to stop the invasion of Kuwait were held hostage by Saddam Hussein, you negotiated the release of French hostages, and thanks to you, they were safely returned to their families. Your friendship with our country, dear Jesse Jackson, is part of the heroic tradition of relations between African American and France. The French abolitionist movement was behind the subscription for the Statue of Liberty. Before that, ties between Black Americans and French people from the Caribbean and the Americas, from the Great Lakes of the North to the Mississippi Delta, contributed to what could be termed the creolization of part of American society. I'm thinking of the cultural and gastronomic creativity of New Orleans, but also lesser-known chapters in our shared history, like that of Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, the mixed-race son of a French father and Afro-Caribbean mother from Santo Domingo, now Haiti, and how not to have a special thought for Haiti today. and was considered the founder of Chicago. In 1917, when the US Army landed in France, it was operating under segregation. Black Americans were even denied the right to fight for their own country as combat troops. They were consigned to auxiliary tasks, which were essential but had little military value. The 369th and 370th Infantry Regiments, known as the Harlem Hellfighters and Black Devils, from New York and Chicago respectively, were those attached to the French army. Unfortunately, they did face discriminations there too, but they were able to fight alongside white men, and they did show great bravery. Those troops changed our fate in two ways: by providing us with essential help to prevail, and by introducing jazz music to our country, which would revolutionize our cultural lives for the next 100 years. Relations between France and African Americans were also at play in the landings in Normandy and Provence, when once again black soldiers overturned prejudices, defended their flag, and helped restore our freedom. Some of Martin Luther King's earliest comrades were World War II veterans, heroes of peace, but also witnesses of the horrors of the concentration camps, which helped awaken their conscience and led them into civil engagement when they returned home. And how can we not mention Josephine Baker, who herself received the Legion of Honor from General de Gaulle for her services to the French resistance. Or indeed artists and writers like Richard Wright or James Baldwin, whose legacy is still very much alive in Paris, which was a place of inspiration for them and no doubt a haven of freedom, surely not immune to racism and prejudices, but far from the institutional, systematic forms it took in America at that time. But our friendship and our alliance, dear Jesse Jackson, go beyond historical legacies. The values you fought for and continue to fight for are the very values of the French Republic. You are not only our friend and ally, you are a brother to us. Our motto has never been far from your struggle, and I hope that it may even have inspired it. Like your friend Nelson Mandela, who theorized about the Rainbow Nation, the world you aspire to is an equal and fair one, where historical wrongs are corrected and present-day wrongs redressed. It is also a world without prejudices, without artificial barriers, where our most precious resource is our common space, to live together, to decide together, to shoulder our responsibilities together, respecting our diversity, but always serving the common good. Decorating you today, I have a special thought for Martin Luther King, obviously, and for the representative John Lewis, one of your comrades, and a very special friend of mine. My dear Jesse Jackson, in the United States, some call you the great unifier, others the conscience of the nation. The core values which have earned you such high praise are those which also cherish in France. You have always taken this ideal to a higher level, driven by an unflagging hope. Because, as you often say, hope is the best weapon. Keep hope alive. The French Republic is grateful for your tireless work to promote liberty, equality, and fraternity, and for the hope you have instilled in us all for over half a century. I just described some of your main fights, your merits. But all of us are very aware of this legacy. What you deliver, what definitely is a privilege to have you here today. This is why it is an honor and a great pleasure for me, on behalf of the French Republic, to decorate you as Commander in the Legion of Honor. Monsieur Jesse Jackson, au nom de la République française, nous vous faisons commandeur de la Légion d'honneur.